You see it recording? Okay. All right. It looks like it's right at 12 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Darby Allday, and I have Wendell Smith with me today, and we're going to present on some issues from the garden. It's springtime, and we have lots of things that are coming up, and so when we're in our offices, a lot of times we have people that call and say, hey, I have this going on, or can you identify this for me? So we're going to do a little bit of that. And then people are getting out into their gardens, and they're starting to do their vegetable gardens and other flower beds, and they need some water. And so we're going to cover some irrigation issues on that. If you have questions, if you want to, you can type them into the chat, and Matt's going to monitor that for us. And as they come up, he will let us know what y'all are asking. We'll try to answer your questions. So one of the first questions that I tend to get are about azaleas. You know, we have people that come in and they have these beautiful azaleas that come in, and then they have the one that looks like the one on the right. And, you know, it's got pale leaves and it's got speckles all over it, and there's no flowers or very little flowers, and they're wanting to know what's wrong with it. Generally, it is going to be an azalea lace bug. And over here on the left-hand side, you've got these little black little spots right there. Those are actually the nymphs that are coming out. But all of this other black that's on there is the excrement from these lace bugs. And this is what they look like if you get up real close on them. They're really clear wings right there. It looks kind of like lace. And then they have the black and the brown that's within those. And then here's a picture where you can see the adult lace wings on there. And what they do is they pierce the leaf there, and they suck the juices out of it, and they cause some damage. You know, a little bit's not going to hurt it all that much, but these can have between 3 and 4 life cycles in a season, and so they can do a whole lot of damage throughout the year on this. One of the ways that you can control it naturally is by letting the lady beetles come and have a feast on them. So, you know, they're a pain when they're in the house, but when they're out in the garden, they're doing what they're supposed to do. And they have a voracious appetite, and they love to eat on those things. You can also spray like bifenthrin for them, or you can use neem oil is one if you're wanting to go a little more organic on that. Another one that I'm starting to see, and this is actually in my yard, in my garden, I kind of put things out, and it's kind of live or die trying. It's kind of the way that it is at my house. And so we have issues on our roses here, and this is the black spot on roses. And it'll usually start out kind of on the lower leaves there, and it'll come up, but they'll start out with these feathery black or dark brown spots on there, and then it'll start to yellow on there, and then it'll completely yellow out that leaf there, and they'll fall off. A lot of times you'll see the spots actually come up on the cane there, and I actually probably need to take this cane out. If I was going to ask Wendell, I'd probably say that's probably what I needed to do on that, or maybe take the whole thing out, you know, may be the better thing. But the best way to really work on these is to clean up all the dead leaves, or the leaves that have fallen, to clean up, you know, and not to put it into a compost pile, not to put it back. Is that what you would say, Wendell, on that?
Yeah, that's a candidate for pruning right there. There's a fungicide, microbutanil, that is Immunox is one brand name, and of course, there's always a difference. I'll ask people what you use, and they'll give me a company name which has nothing to do with the active ingredient. So, but myclobutanil, which is Immunox, has that, but other people do too. In the vegetable circles, is Rally, but that's a good one for that black spot right there.
All right, so we'll move on to our next one. Another one that we'll start to see a whole lot, and a lot of times when we get the calls, is when you see this orange alien looking thing that is growing in your cedar trees. And this is cedar apple rust, and it's got to have both hosts. It's got to have a cedar tree and it's got to have an apple tree for it to work, because they cross between each other. And if you don't have one or the other, you don't have cedar apple rust. But here is what it looks like when it's kind of dormant, when it's not active in the cedar trees. It usually doesn't do a whole lot of damage to them. You'll just kind of see this ball kind of sitting on the cedar tree. And then when we kind of get the moist, warm weather that we've had right now, they start to sporulate, and this is what they look like when they do that. So we get a lot of calls on that. So they don't do so much damage on your cedar trees, but they do a lot more damage on the fruits of your apples. They can just kind of make them ugly.
And bright rust-colored spots on the leaves of the apple.
Yes, and I should have put one in there, and I didn't think about it.
You can't miss it. It's a really bright rusty.
It is. The next one that we tend to get calls on is on stink bugs. And we have our common garden variety stink bug right here. And he is native to our area. You know, we've seen him for years, but the one that we're really having issues with is this brown marmorated stink bug. And one of the ways that you can identify it is on its antennas here. It's going to have the striping on it. It's going to have the white stripes on it. And then back here at the back of it, it's going to have these white triangles that you'll see. Those are kind of two key ways that you can tell that you've got those. These are ones that you don't want to kill in the house because they do stink. We've got a publication online that talks about how to remove the stink bugs there. The brown marmorated stink bug is an Asian variety one that has been brought in and introduced, and they are the ones that love to get in the house and cause all kinds of trouble in the fall. And then in the spring, whenever they come back out and they're ready to go back outside, and you see them everywhere.
So both of those are overwintering as an adult. And I'm seeing tons of the marmorated, probably more of them than I am the common now.
I am too. I agree. I mean, you know, most of them that I see, that's what I see is brown marmorated on that. Another one that we tend to have a lot of trouble with is the Asian lady beetle. And one of the ways that you can identify the Asian lady beetle is up here on their head, you'll see this W or this M, whichever way that you're looking at it. You'll see this up here on, and that's a big indicator that it's the Asian lady beetle. They can be different colors. They can have different amounts of spots. So they can be easily identified because of the white up here on their head and the M or the W that you see there. Again, you know, we see them a whole lot when they come into the house in the fall, and then in the spring, you know, they want to go back out. And they really are beneficial when they're outside of the house because they do eat a lot of aphids and lace bugs and lots of pests that we have in our yards. And then we have bagworms that tend to be issues for evergreens. And the way that you can kind of identify them is they'll kind of have like this cocoon that looks kind of like the part of the tree, you know, but it's usually brown and the rest of it is usually green when you see these. And these have the little worms that are that overwinter in there, and while they're in there, you can't really spray anything to get rid of them. You can take them and squish them between your fingers or under your feet there, and you can mash them that way, but some of them get pretty high up. And so if you're going to do a spray control, you need to do it when they are out and actively feeding. That's usually in May. We have seen them, you know, at the end of April, depends on how warm we get. We have seen them, you know, going into June. So you just kind of have to monitor and see when you see them. And you'll see this little black worm kind of drop out from it, you know, and it'll kind of inch down, and they start out, you know, and there's not a whole lot of them on the trees, you know, and if you don't control them, then, you know, in a year or two, your whole tree is going to be filled with them, and they'll destroy your tree.
By about the second half of May, they'll look like a little speck of dust with a dunce cap where they're starting to build that. And that is an excellent time. They have no defense right there, and most any insecticide will take them out right then. So just mark your calendar for the second half of May into the first week of June. I sprayed some white pine 10 years ago at the right time, and I have not had another one since on that. So timing is everything.
And then we also tend to get these calls of, you know, people have stuff growing in their mulch and they're wanting to know what it is. And a lot of times we'll get this dog vomit slime mode. It looks like somebody just went out there and threw up in your mulch, and it's kind of this cream color to a yellow color on that. Most of the time, whenever it dries up and the sun comes out and hits it, it goes away on its own, and you don't have to worry about it at all. And since I was talking about mold, I thought I would talk a little bit about a fungus over here. This is one that I found on a tree branch that had fallen in our backyard, and Dr. Wyndham said that this was a purple wood decay fungus. He said it's just a naturally occurring fungus, but it was the first time that I'd ever seen it, and I thought it was a really pretty picture, so I showed it to you. But on this tree too, on this branch right here, we have the lichens that are, you can see a little bit of those. Those don't kill your trees. They don't have anything to do with your trees except for they need a place to hang out. So they are not parasitic to your tree. So if you have somebody that asks you about those or shows you those, it's not what's killing your tree. It may be declining and it's a sign of decline, but it's not going to kill your tree. So now we're going to move on into some weeds that we may be seeing. And for some people, they may be weeds, and other people, they may be great things that they love to have in their yard. And one of the easiest ones to kind of identify is chickweed. And we kind of have two varieties here. We have the common chickweed, and one of the ways to identify it is it's going to have the pointed leaves on it. It's going to have a little white flower there. It does have some little hairs on it. And right across from it here is mouse ear chickweed. And I learned this week, so, you know, it's always great to learn new things. Mouse ear is more rounded here, and it's really fuzzy on the leaves. And then I noticed too that it's got purple on the stems there. Maybe the purple goes out of it, maybe it doesn't, but in this picture it's got the purple on the stems versus these that have all green on them.
Now, Cindy Shapton, our herb lady, would make a smoothie with that chickweed right there. But my chickens like it pretty well also.
Yeah, a lot of these people do use them to eat. They'll go and pick them and eat them in salads and different things, you know, but that's not my specialty. So I'm not going to tell you really if you can eat them or if you can't eat them. I'm sure you can find somebody that will tell you that, but I'm not educated enough to tell you for sure, you know, that what you can do with all of them. So that's probably not going to be a question that I'm going to truly answer for you on that. And then next we have wild violets, and they tend to like to grow in areas that are a little bit shadier and moist. My whole backyard right now, because it tends to be in shade, is all back here in the very backyard is this white and purple violet, and then you have this other one that's kind of the common wild violet that is growing right here. And I apologize, my son has my youngest in here right now, and so he's probably going to cry, and I apologize if he does. Next up, we have prickly lettuce, and this is one that comes up, and sometimes because it's got the prickles on it and everything, and it's got the serrated leaves there. Sometimes people kind of get it confused maybe with thistle a little bit, because thistle also has prickly leaves, but prickly lettuce, on the back side of it, it's going to have all these little white hairs hanging down that are kind of prickly, and that's how you can tell that that's prickly lettuce. Thistle tends to grow in a rosette form, so as it's coming out, it's going to branch out in a rosette, and it's going to get tall, and it's going to have a purple flower usually whenever it blooms, and then it kind of turns white, kind of downy, kind of like a dandelion. And whenever it goes to seed like that, you're going to have a whole lot more the next year, and so you probably don't want that. Two other ones that are kind of sometimes confused with each other is this yellow wood sorrel. They're trifoliate leaves here, and if you look at this one, it has wood sorrel has a heart-shaped leaf on there. It also has a 5-petal flower on it. They will open and close at night and open back up in the morning time whenever the sun comes out and hits them. And it's sometimes confused with hop clover. Hop clover has 3 leaves to it, but they're more of an oblong, oval shaped leaf there. And it has a yellow flower too, but it's more of a bulb flower. It's more of what you think of as a clover type flower on it. And these are really good food sources for the bees in the springtime, aren't they, Wendell? And then we're going to move on to bed straw or cleavers. These are some that whenever I see them coming up, I try to get rid of them pretty quick, because if I let them go too far, then my dogs are going to be bringing them in, and I'm going to be bringing them in, and my kids are going to be bringing them in, because they're kind of like Velcro, and they'll attach to you and stick. I guess that's where it kind of get the cleavers, is they kind of cleave to you. And from what I've read, bed straw, they used to like stuff it into mattresses, so it used to be ticking, you know, so it's called bed straw, is what I understand. But they tend to go in a whorl pattern going up the stalk there, and the stalk is kind of angular whenever you feel it. And when you feel it, it has a rough texture to it, which is kind of like the Velcro that kind of sticks to you. This next picture is poison hemlock, and oftentimes it's confused with Queen Anne's lace or wild carrot. It has this really frilly leaf there. It's kind of delicate looking. It's got a white flower that'll kind of head out, kind of like the Queen Anne's lace flower will. But the key to it, or to identifying it, is that it's going to have this purple on the stem here. It may be speckled kind of on the purple of that. And you do not want to eat it. I know some people eat wild carrot. This one you do not want to eat unless you have a death wish. It's poisonous, so you don't want to eat it. And some people actually have reactions just by touching it. So that's something to be aware of, that you could have an allergic reaction to it just by touching it. Next, we have dandelions, and a lot of people, if they're just want a beautiful lawn, think of these as weeds, but a lot of people will use these for jams and other things. But the bees really like these, and this is one of the first food sources for bees. So if you're going to be spraying your yard and you've got bees around, you may want to start to rethink that, because the bees do use this as a food source at the beginning of the spring. And then this one is what it looks like whenever it gets ready to seed. And we used to make wishes on these and send them flying, and my parents probably didn't like that a whole lot, but it's what we did as kids. Next, we have wild geraniums, and this one is like the Carolina geranium, and they look very similar to the geraniums that we grow in our flower gardens, although I don't usually see these blooming a whole lot, so they're not the showy flower geraniums that we're used to. And then we have wild garlic, and it grows abundantly in my backyard there, and they are very deep, but if you were to break them, they have a garlicky smell, and if you dig the bulb up, they look like a garlic clove.
And so them and the wild violets have bulbs, and they're much harder to kill if you're trying to kill them, because they have a lot of energy down in that bulb stored up. So they both present a tougher problem for control if that's what you're after.
The next couple of slides that I have are ones that I tend to get in the office that people want to know what it is. Virginia creeper is often confused with poison ivy because it tends to climb up the trees and the sides of everything, and so people see it and they think, oh no, I've got poison ivy, but it's not. And the key to poison ivy and Virginia creeper is poison ivy will have 3 leaves and Virginia creeper has 5 leaves. Is a big distinguishing factor on that. They have serrations on the edges, they're pointed. Poison ivy tends to be a little bit more of a fatter kind of leaf, although it could be, a little bit thinner there, but it does have the 3 leaves to it. The next thing that I tend to have people wanting to know what it is wild blackberry when it's first coming up. It's a trifoliate leaf there, so, and it's got the serrations, but it's more serrated like the Virginia creeper is, where the poison ivy tends not to have as much serration on the leaves. And then another foliate leaf here is the wild Indian strawberry. And this one is in bloom. It's got the yellow bloom right now. And it's one that you'll see a lot of times in patches, and it tends to be in a little bit damper area is what my experience has been with this, with the Indian strawberry. Then we have blue field madder, and it has like a kind of periwinkle blue flower on it that is kind of star shaped, and it kind of blooms and then just kind of blends in after a while, at least in my yard it seems to. And then over here we have another kind of purple flower, which is vetch, and vetch is a legume that'll put some nitrogen back into the soil there, and a lot of people plant it to help with erosion control, but it can get out of hand there. But you'll see it has a flower that looks similar to your snap peas if you're planting snap peas when you see them, and then they'll have a pod that's similar to that later on. Two other weeds that we get a lot on, and I get a lot of questions about, I get pokeweed, poke salad. A lot of people will come in and they'll ask about it, but it has a very long tuber on it, and if you don't get it out of the ground, it's really hard to control it because it'll keep coming back if you don't get it out. If you don't want it in your yard, then you've got to control that tuber that it has with it. And then this other one is curly dock, and it's different from the prickly lettuce, as it has a smooth backside to the leaf there, but it's very wavy here on the margins on it, and it kind of curls a little bit as you're looking at it. It kind of waves. So that's your dock. The last one that we're going to talk about is purple dead nettle and henbit. These are two winter annuals that we see a whole lot. Most of the time, your purple dead nettle will start to have purple up here at the top of it. It will have some shade of purple. None of my purple dead nettle this year had any purple to it so far. So it's very similar right now. A lot of times people say, well, I identify it because of the purple color. Well, the purple color is not helping me this year on this, but what I can tell on the purple dead nettle is that it has these kind of triangular shapes, leaf that are on there. It's going to have these little purple flowers that are on there, and it does tend to have a purple color to it. Henbit is going to have more of a scalloped shaped leaf. They're going to be more rounded in their shape as they're on there. They're going to have a flower that is going to be very similar to it, and you can see on this one was starting to bloom. This one had already bloomed, but the bees love both henbit and purple dead nettle in the spring, and if you give them enough time, they'll disappear on their own without having to control them. They're easily pulled up if you want it out of wherever it is. And they're both in the mint family. And you can tell that because they have this square stem right there. And on this last slide here, we have gone to having a lot of our publications put in one spot, and UT Hort is where that is. And to find it, you just type in uthort.com, and it'll take you to that website. And then you can pick if you're looking for insects, diseases, or anything like that, or if you're looking for shrubs, fruits, vegetables, you just click on it and it'll take you there. And then I have a couple of the publications that are listed on that site. We also have a turf grass website, and it helps us to identify the turf grass weeds, and it's at TennesseeTurfGrassWeeds.org. I have the site there on it. And there's also a mobile weed manual that you can use, that you can click on it. You can download it to your computer or pin it to your computer. It's not actually an app, but you can go in there, and if you know what you're looking at, you can type it in there and it'll give you all the different controls. Or if you're trying to find something, you can use it. It has several different uses on that. So, is there any questions so far? If not, I guess I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Wendell there, and he's going to talk irrigation.
So really, for bee forage, we all have a very good excuse for having our yard look kind of weedy and trashy and everything, right?
Yes, very much so, because pretty much all of those that were blooming now are great sources for the bees.
So beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I think Sheila would agree with me on that. Okay. Well, what I'm going to get into here applies more to vegetable gardening. And some 15 years ago or so, the Amish began plans for a produce auction, and so started getting into the world of commercial vegetables. And we got into installation and usage of drip irrigation. But for a homeowner, whether you have an acre or a half acre, I've got my prime home garden is about 100 by 100, quarter of an acre. And after helping folks with that for a number of years and getting some of that and using it on my own, I found that I pretty well would not grow my regular garden without some form of drip irrigation. Even in the very best year with ample moisture, there's always said I left. At any rate, there's always a window where you need more moisture, and particularly when plants are onto their mature portion, tomatoes and pumpkins and things. And sometimes uneven soil moisture makes cracking and problems like that. And the ability to provide a little bit of water in a very economical way, to me, is really worth it. So I'm going to run through just a little bit of some basics of just a rig you might use as a homeowner, and then show you just a couple of different aspects of it. So the main thing this is based on, and everybody, you can get a soaker hose and buy those, and I don't know, I hadn't bought one, I don't guess in decades, and so I don't know what they cost, but they're a little cumbersome and not particularly long-lived. But the Israelis and a company called Netafim really pioneered really efficient use of water. And if you know where they're at and what the surrounding territory looks like, and then you see pictures of where their food production is, what they do with a tiny amount of water is amazing. So the heart of what I would prescribe for a home gardener is just based on this drip tape, and we'll use this camera here. And it's an 8 mil right here. That's about a 1/2 inch in diameter when it is squeezed in its round form, what it might look like pressurized. It comes just flat on a roll. You can get it anywhere from 1,000 or a few hundred feet for a homeowner size, or on up the typical roll that I have. There's about 7,500 feet on a roll. And I've had from one pump about 1.5 miles going before, and the water usage is still not that great. So if you notice, there are two stripes. The beauty of this tape is that it has the orifices, or where the water drips out, is built right into the tape. And so these are spaced at about once every foot. And I don't know if you'll see the little slit there, likely not. It's very tiny. The water actually goes through a little labyrinth back and forth before it comes out of this, and that helps keep it unclogged. So there's an emitter built in every 12 inches in this tape throughout its entire length. You can buy them at different flow rates, but the most typical and what I've always used is about 1/2 gallon per 100 feet per minute is the flow rate. So, you know, if you're figuring out your supply, you can use that. And this gets put on and just left for, you know, a couple hours or so, whatever, depending on your moisture conditions. Within a couple of hours, it wets in between the 12 inches and also to the side of the row up to 1.5 feet or so in width. But your row middles will remain dry. And so it's putting the water right where you want. You're not throwing it up in the air, subject to evaporation of overhead sprinklers. You're not watering the middles of your row where you're going to have to keep them clean if you don't have some kind of mulch or plastic. And so that's the beauty of that. When things get really dry, I can keep the plants and with water right where I need it. And the rows actually in drier weather, when you have the drip tape, and this capability is even more favorable than years that are wet. But again, in almost every year, I've never had a time where I put this out for nothing, and it made a big difference in yield and quality. So for a homeowner, probably just city water or a well is going to be your source, and you can do a pretty good sized garden without cranking up your water bill because these are so efficient. And one major factor on this drip tape is it is not for high pressure. It will function somewhere between 8 and 12 PSI, or pounds per square inch. So you will need a pressure regulator, but for the homeowner, that comes in a very handy and small size right here. So what I'm holding is probably $10 roughly, and this has hose threads on it, which will fit right to a garden hose. Now, be aware that there is NPT or pipe thread, which is a different pitch thread than the hose threads right here. They're not interchangeable. So if you decide to get into this and use this, you need to make sure that whether it's hose thread or pipe. Here's one that I use with an injector sometime, a small flow, and this one is pipe thread. So I've actually screwed in a pipe to hose adapter right there. So you can get them in different flow rates and sizes, but for a homeowner, these right here will do several hundred feet, 400 or 500 feet of row at a time. So adapters like this are available right here. This is hose thread right here, and on this end, it's just a barb fitting where the drip tape itself can actually fit. The beauty of these things is I don't have to have a pocket full of tools and a lot of time to set it up. When I set a row of plants, and my broccoli almost needed water the other day until another deluge came. So I can get out there. Here's my hose adapter and my regulator, and so they're both just hose thread, and hand tight is good enough on these type things when you're doing it. And if I had 100 or even 200 feet of row and my drip tape, then I can just shove that over the hose barb and then tighten up that collar. Let me get it right there. Tighten up that collar, and that's holding it good enough right there for a non-leak fitting. And at the end of it, you can buy what they call a closure, and I'll mention a spot or two where you can get this stuff. This is just 3/4 inch orchard tubing or flat tube that's been cut in a small section. And you just have to fold over this drip tape 4 or 5 times and make it a little thicker where it'll stick inside that opening. And so I'm closing up this by inserting that in the 3/4 inch. And that will just seal it off once I get it done correctly. Anyway, very easy to do out in the field. See if I can try one more time here. Shove that in there. And then when that's under pressure, that cannot unfold. And so that's as simple as the end is. Now, if you don't want to even fool with them, you can just tie an overhand knot or two in the end of your drip tape, tighten that up, and that's going to leak and drip just a tiny bit. But after all, we're dripping water in the row where plants are. So just make that knot close to where your last plant in the row is, and you're good to go. For my garden out here, 100 by 100, I can hook this up to the hose, and if I've just got a couple of 2 or 3 rows that I'm going to do and I don't want to fool with a header line, then there are T's and L's, and they have the barb on them. And so if you want to jump over a row, you could just put an elbow, slide that on there, tighten him up, and a short jumper over and another elbow, and you've got another whole row rigged up. There are T's and things, and when I've been irrigating some giant pumpkins, I've used drip tape with T's and elbows, and you can make a grid system even in a small area if you want to. So that works real easy for just a couple of rows. Now, in the instance that I have 100 feet and I'm going to come off with 10 or 15 rows maybe off of that 100 foot, I'll go with a header line. And so there are compression fittings where this larger size orchard tubing, you can get it in 1/2 inch like this. And I'll talk about that emitter that's on it here in just a second. 3/4, 1 inch, 1.5 inches. When I'm pumping from the creek and had several thousand feet of drip tape out, I used a 2-inch header line and then went down to 1-inch subheaders. But for the gardener, 3/4 inch will run several hundred feet of row at the same time. So in that instance, let's just find this here. I would use either inch or 3/4, and this is inch right here. And you take a punch and punch a hole, similar to that right there. This punch will punch a hole just like that. And for that instance, I will pop in just a valve right here. So this barb end gets me into that tube. I'll punch it in until it pops and then tighten it. So that's the installation right there. No tools, nothing else. And then on this end, it's the exact same size that the drip tape goes. So there, in just a matter of a few seconds, I have plumbed into my header line and hooked up a valve and supplied a whole new row. And this has an on and off in case you have a leak or something happens. You can turn this valve on and off for each individual row. Also helpful if you have more rows than what your supply line can run at one time. You can turn half of them on and half of them off. Some plants may not need as much water as others and be on a different timing cycle, so you can just give the rows that need water by turning on and off these valves right here. Had a question, what's that punch called? And it's really just, I don't know, it has a particular name, but it's a punch for the drip tape valve. And so it's closer to, it's under 1/2 inch, but the companies that sell that tape will have that. So any questions you have on that, pop it up in there. But that's the easiest thing going. And so your hose at a low volume with that pressure regulator, you can put up several rows and get them going all at one time with no problem. Now, going to do blueberries or something like that. Width is getting low. I'll hurry. Now, if you're going to do
question, Wendell.
Yes.
April Ray wants to know what the punch tool is called.
Yeah. I just tried to answer that. I don't know that it has any specific name other than it is the punch for the drip tape valve. There's not other than that if you describe it as such, they'll know what it is you need. So, and that leads me to this. If you're going to do blueberries, you'll do something like this orchard tube that comes in half or 3/4 diameter. And what you see right here is a pressure compensating emitter. On blueberries, we're going to stick them maybe 6 feet apart or so in a row. And you don't want to put water outside of those plants. And so an emitter one emitter like this on either side of a blueberry makes a nice drip and will soak just around the blueberry. In that instance, don't see my smaller punch right here. Yes. In that instance, you'll use a littler punch like this and just punch a small hole, and that emitter can be popped in and out right there. Let me get right in the right spot. So there's the hole. I always put all my holes on the blue stripe, just at least I know they are facing the right direction. These things can have a little twist in them. So when I punch a hole with this smaller, and this would be a punch for pressure compensating emitters, I'll just punch that in, grab an emitter, and you just stick that in by hand, and there's your entire installation. No tools except for the punch. One on each side of a blueberry plant, maybe 18 inches apart or so. And then you've got a super efficient way to keep blueberries moist later on during the hot weather when they are bearing. They usually need some help. One thing about this tape, when the tape is laying on the ground and you're running water through it, it's cool. It will sweat a little bit. And so occasionally Mr. Rabbit or Mr. Vole or Mr. whoever, little varmint that likes a cool drink of water, is signaled by that condensation and gets over there to lick it. And then they have a nice way of kind of nibbling on that. And once they nibble and figure out that they can get a real nice flow going by chewing, then you've got a problem. And so it's real easy to fix that. On the tape, I'll show you a quick repair method. So let's just say Mr. Vole decided to punch a hole right there. And you'll see it leaking, maybe shooting up in there, or a big wet spot. So what I would do to repair that is cut the bad spot out, and I use a nice handy-dandy Victorinox. It's got scissors for that. It's got a blade to cut tubing. This cuts the tape very well. It has a screwdriver which actually knocks out. These get plugged up, and you can see that little bit of plastic in there where I punched a lot of holes. I take the screwdriver and just punch out and clear that. Makes it a lot easier to use. So here is a repair coupling. So I cut out the part with a hole, stick that in there, and stick the other end. And within seconds, and these are threaded in opposite directions, so you can tighten it very well. And so that's all it takes to repair that. Okay, so in the blueberries, when these things are dripping, and you've got this orchard tubing, it's more expensive than drip tape, which is only a few a cent or two a foot. But this is a more of a long-term thing. And I've got this orchard tubing that's been installed 12, 14 years, extremely UV resistant, incredibly so. But you don't want to leave this on the ground or the same thing will happen. It'll sweat, varmints will get in there and chew holes in it, and this is not as easy to repair. So I would recommend on blueberries, have a solid post on each end of the row and run a piece of smooth wire about 18 inches above the ground, and then just use some UV resistant zip ties and fasten this to the wire all through there. And this is actually up above the ground where voles and ground running varmints like rabbits and groundhogs and everything else can't get to it. So the tape usually is just left on the ground because repair is easy and cost is low. If you're doing blueberries, then you want to be sure and have this on a wire up above the ground. So that's about it. You can do fertilizer injection through this tape. There are larger ones. This is called a Mozzie right here, and this is really designed for 1 inch, but I can use it in my garden with only about 250 or 300 feet a row. I can use this. So you route the water through here, and this little area right here creates what's called a venturi, and it actually will suck water up. My tube is missing because it UV did destroy it, so I have to replace that. So I mix a 20-20-20 potassium nitrate, whatever fertilizer I'm going to use, in a 5-gallon bucket, and I run this siphon hose into it, adjust this valve so the water is actually going around this circuit instead of straight through the whole thing. Here's a little bit larger. This is the pressure regulator. 2 to 20 gallons per minute is the range that this will function. The venturi takes about 15% of your pressure away in volume. So you have to be sure you run enough row to make this venturi effect take hold. But it's super efficient, and then you can spoon feed fertilizer right in the row, water-soluble type fertilizers right there. Any questions right there? That's just the down and dirty, but the basics for a homeowner: a $10 regulator, a little roll of a few hundred feet of drip tape. If you've got short rows and they're not out in the field, you might want to go, this is 8 mil tape. You can buy 10 mil, and you would probably be able to reuse the drip tape itself for a few years. When I'm putting them out in bigger rows out in the field where they're getting covered over with vines and things, I just generally figure on getting 1 year of usage out of that tape. But again, it's only a cent or so per foot. So anyway, I swear by this, and I crank it all out every year and get it, because I have yet to find a year where I could not benefit and indeed pay for the trouble and the cost of it every year. Any questions on the drip? Oh yes, one last item. I initially started dealing with rain flow. These are some Mennonites up in East Earl, Pennsylvania. And they now have a website. They do not do cards and things to purchase directly online. You still have to call them up. But it is RAINFLO irrigation.com. And they're very nice. You can request a catalog, and their catalog is really worth it because it has little schematics and depictions and charts on flow and things. They have a homeowner garden kit that is enough to do several hundred feet of row, with plenty to do some more the next year. And I think it's about $145 to get everything you would need to do several years worth. But you can get going for less, as I described. These type little fittings here are generally $1. A valve is about $1.50 now, like that one right there. The ability to cut it on and off. These will last for years and years. Little fittings like this right here for the tape. That's a hose fitting. You know, nothing's over about $1 or so. So that is one possibility. Rain flow irrigation in Pennsylvania. Morton's Horticultural in McMinnville carries some of this stuff now. And so that's Morton's Horticultural Products.com in McMinnville, Tennessee. There's Darby's got that link posted. Thank you, Darby. Or not the link, but the website. And Morton's Horticultural Products in McMinnville has some of this stuff. If you'll just Google, drip tape, people like John Deere, Toro are in that business of the tape and things you need also with it. But Rainflow is so good because you get that catalog and it's got little explanations and drawings. And when you call up, they'll make sure you have everything you need. They're just very knowledgeable people. They manufacture larger equipment for setting vegetables, handle pumps, and everything to do with every kind of irrigation you can dream of. They've got it at Morton's Horticultural Products. So that's rounds it out, and once it dries out here shortly, I'll be out setting mine up, and of course I'll just start out with the hose setup and probably put off doing a header line until just a little bit later. Darby, she's all yours.
All right. Do we have any last minute questions? If not, I guess we are.
I have one question, Darby. I wanted to ask Santa Claus while he's in his workshop there, how does he get all those gifts delivered in one, I guess, 20-hour period? He might have more explain that.
Well, Kevin, that's funny you should ask. We use a little technique called magic, my friend. We fly under the radar and seemingly can be in more than one place at once. Extension agents can do that, right?
Yes, so. I just wanted an explanation. Thanks. You did a good job answering that.
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate everybody being with us, right, Darby?
Yes. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, guys.
Thanks.
All right, Darby, when you close out the meeting, your computer will start recording the presentation to your computer. They'll start saving it.
Okay.
Hey,
So
Wendell.
you'll probably go into a folder called Zoom, and then once it's done saving it, you can do whatever you want to with it.
Okay.
Hey, Wendell, are you working through the end of this month?